in a weird sort of way, I like choosing things that don't fit into the typical template that films are normally made in. And I read this, and it just seemed like, it's about a bad guy, really, who ends up winning big at the end by doing bad things. and there's absolutely no repentance, and he learns no lesson at the end. And I thought, like, well, that's not really told that often. I mean, I remember the last time this was made into a film, they had to have Georges shot at the end because the studio thought that audiences wouldn't be able to take it. But this one, he just wins the lottery at the end. One of the other things that attracted me to the job was that there was 4 weeks of rehearsal, which you just don't get in films ever, unless you're doing some kind of training or something. But this was pure in the same place, literally rehearsing it like a play, which I thought was a really interesting idea. And it did. It was very, completely different to anything I've done before, and absolutely exhausting at the beginning. Because trying to fit one medium into another really is like, you do learn a lot, but it's absolutely exhausting. There was just this thing about, which I grew up with a lot of people who just thought that they didn't need to do anything and they deserved as much as everyone else did. It's like now everyone thinks that, they want to have a job in advertising or something, like some cool thing as soon as they're sort of 20. And, when everyone else thought, you had to go on the conveyor belt and go through work till you're 45 until you have a reasonably cool job. But there's something about Georges where he just realizes that there are loopholes in the system, and realizes you don't really need any conceivable talent, you don't need anything. You just need to want, and that's it. And it's just, and the more he succeeds, the more contempt he has for everybody as well, because you realize that all these other people, are trying, they're just fooling themselves. The story of Georges Duroy, who is an ex-cavalry officer, never really did anything in the army, comes from a lowly background in rural France, and leaves the army and moves to Paris thinking that everyone else is making loads of money, so why can't he make loads of money as well? And realizes that it's not as simple, and becomes obsessed with the fact that it's just about the people you know and about connections, and because he doesn't have connections, he resents the entire world. And he basically, by fluke, falls into a clique of people who are making money by relatively auspicious means. Does that make sense? I don't know. And he goes with it. They all see something in him which he doesn't even see in himself, but it goes completely to his head. And even though throughout the entire story he doesn't realize what it is that makes him successful, he gets vain and more power crazed, and he believes in himself a lot, even though he doesn't know what it is exactly he's believing in. It starts off the story with him thinking that this world is so glorious and glamorous, and he sees these women as goddesses when he first goes into it. And I think the women, as they're all perceived as nothing really by their husbands and the people around them, they want to acknowledge his adoration, and they can see immediately that he thinks they're more special than anyone else thinks they are, and it works really well for him, and he manages to persuade them into doing things that they wouldn't necessarily do otherwise. I think if you look at most human beings, there's not anything that's, I mean, everybody has probably more bad points than good points. I mean, even if they're little petty bad points, I mean, but the strange thing is Georges never attempts to do anything good at all. But you can see, I mean, things about it, he is tricked into doing, you know, he goes into a world which he initially thinks is what he wants, and it looks like it's filled with energy, and he's felt that he was dealt a bad hand in life, and then he feels that finally the door's open and things will start happening, and then he does start to realise the hypocrisy in things, and the fact that most of the people who are succeeding in life are worthless, like kind of scumbags, and but the reason he succeeds as well, which he never acknowledged about himself, is that he's a scumbag too. Which is quite, I mean, I think that's a very human trait, the fact that he never really realised that he's just as bad as everybody else. Uma, Kristina and Kristen are like, all three of them are incredibly different, but also, I mean, similar in that they're all very, very strong, and that they've all had long careers, and they know exactly how they want to do things, which was great for Georges, because I mean, it means you can play. I mean, what I always saw about Georges and any good manipulator, you have to completely assimilate into their world. You're not, and you're different around all of them, and because they each dictated the mood of a scene, like you just follow along with them, and they're all so different, and they could, just their presence in a scene will change everything, and then you can just kind of follow it. And so even the days felt different, you know, with each different actress. I mean, there's a completely different mood throughout the crew and throughout everything, just because they all had such powerful personalities, which was great for that. I always remember that the first entrance to the La Vie Française office, I thought that looked great, and just there's one thing that Declan and Nick do really amazingly well, which is the organisation of the background actors, which no one really puts that much attention into normally, and it's just walking into this set where everything was moving. It looked like a massive clock, everything moving around. It was so well done, and each of the extras have been given specific direction, and everybody's improvising. It's just so strange and completely, you know, they really all own their characters, and normally it's just, you know, I mean, you could interact with everybody there, and it was really, I mean, that was kind of amazing. I liked kind of fighting in the, you know, getting drunk and fighting and stuff in Budapest as well. So I mean, that's always fun. It's just something different, and I mean, it doesn't follow a typical storyline. I think hopefully it will make you think afterwards. I mean, most of the people who worked on it, they're sort of thinking. I mean, every actor who's come on is so sort of almost like baffled by the fact that he doesn't get his comeuppance, because it's just not in films nowadays. That's what happens. Like, someone does bad things, they will get punished for it, but he doesn't at all. And there's a kind of, it's done with a sort of zeal that like he's just screwing everybody over, and the main point is it's someone who wins who doesn't have any redeeming features. There's nothing about him. It's just, he's just he's like negative energy,